even though food's not here yet, we're gonna give them extra time to visit with us. I first made contact with Jim, it may have been late December or early January, and what caught my eye was, at the time I knew Jim was Republican, and I knew Joyce was Democrat, and I saw a picture of them in an airplane, big smiles. And so I read the captioning around it, and they apparently had a Rotary Dog and Pony show that they did, and about bipartisanship. And at the time, this was not horribly long after the election and the inauguration. It was in that time frame when things in our country and our state were fairly heated, and so it was a nice thing to see. And so I contacted Jim and said, we'd love to have y'all come talk to our club about this. He contacted me back pretty quickly, within an hour. And by 8 o'clock that night, we had a date and everything. So regardless, they're going to serve food while y'all are speaking. So pardon our gestation.
I'll try not to make you sick.
Well, for y'all, while Jamie's trying to look that up, one of the things that Rotary has internationally is peace centers. And there's, I can't remember, 7 or 8 of those, less than 10 in the world. But the last few years, Arkansas Rotarians have been working, and their goal is that the next peace center will be at Clinton Center. And so, and that would be people like already coming from all over the world to do that.
Well, Joyce?
Let's go to.
So, what they're working on there, and this was Misty's idea, is, have you seen our video yet, Joyce?
The one on YouTube?
Yeah.
I have, yeah.
No, the ones we released today,
Oh.
Common Ground.
I have not.
Okay, well, if you get a chance, we may do that, but,
That would be good.
why don't you come over here, Joyce, and
I thought you were about to show something, I was getting out of the way.
now we may get sorted
Okay,
out.
all right, okay.
Joyce, why don't you start, tell us a little bit about our relationship and how we came to try to work together on a few things.
Yes, even though for all these years of growing up in Arkansas and being a staunch Democrat, I was never a person who thought it's a good idea if it's all Democratic or if it's all Republican. And when because every time it seems like we get to this point where it's, it's super or whatever, no matter which party, things start going off the rails, and then we've been going off the rails, period. But Jim and I had this relationship where we didn't have a lot of things in common, not many at all that we knew about because we hadn't talked. And that was the major thing. We hadn't ever bothered to sit down, talk to each other, get to know each other. And lo and behold, as is a common truth, when you get to know people, you relate differently. And on top of that, both of us just got kind of disgusted with what was happening. To have a Democrat and a Republican turn around to each other and go, oh no, not this. And that started happening a lot. And then we had an issue where we were so divided by race, and we were thinking of a small state, something needs to be done about this. And we talked a great deal about these things that Jim had seen that he would talk to me about. As an African American, this, blah, blah, blah. Then I could get to see his perspective. And that was so encouraging. So we got the idea that somebody in this state is going to have to lead at some point, and we need to figure out a way to talk about our different experiences and recognize the sum of us is what we ought to be shooting for and not the division of us. So we got this great idea, and we were soundly defeated in this, I'll just tell you now, but we thought it was wonderful. How about if the legislature led, So
We would think.
You would think.
What an idea.
Crazy idea. So we get together, write up our proposal, and present it to the body that would have said okay. And that's a body of about roughly 31 people or so. We got 9 votes, and that included ours.
Good.
And that was very disappointing. But after that, that's when we got the call from the Rotary Club in Peru asking us, this is something we're interested in, to see bipartisanship and see people. We thought we had everything, man, woman, black, white, Democratic person, and Republican person. But that's the thing that really got us going on this. And so we flew up to Paragould and had to talk about this, and actually got a contact from, I forgot somebody else, but at the time just forgot. That's how we got going. But we've known each other, of course, through the Senate. Is how we really got to know each other well.
Well, so I'll tell you the first time that I really got this determined to begin to try to work with Joyce on some of these issues, there were a couple of pivotal moments for me. One was, have any of y'all seen the movie Hidden Figures?
Yes.
Where it talks about the African American women and the impact they had on the space program?
Yes.
And it talks about the discrimination that they suffered as they were going through that period in our history back in the 60s. And I came to Joyce after I saw that movie and I said, Joyce, did you experience that in your life? Did you live that? Because I never did. I never experienced separate bathrooms and the kind of discrimination that those depicted in that movie. And she shared with me some of her experiences. The second event was I remember we had a bill to separate the holidays, Martin Luther King and Robert E. Lee Day. And I believe I was in the House when those were combined, and it was almost just like a poke in the eye to do that. And it was something that needed to be done for a long time. But I remember as that bill came through House Education, Joyce and I were both on the committee that was hearing this bill. And Joyce was sitting across from the table from me, and I was sitting on the other side of the Education Committee, and I heard some of the testimony that was just outright racist. And I could just see the pain in Joyce's eye, and I'm thinking, here we are in 2017, still with people bringing this kind of stuff and these kind of ideas before the legislature. And we worked together with a lot of other people and finally got that piece of legislation passed. And as Joyce said, we worked together on, we thought after Charlottesville, after the violence that happened there, that's what motivated us to put together the Race Relations Subcommittee, was what this was going to be, a committee of legislative leaders to come up and figure out how are ways that we can find, encourage,
You can say common ground.
Common ground, find ways to make education of people about our history and try to make people have the kind of discussions that Joyce and I have been having. I needed to understand Joyce's perspective, and Joyce needed to understand my perspective. An example of me trying to share with her my perspective was, as we were flying up to Jonesboro, that was right after the Colin Kaepernick kneeling situation. And I'm 25 years retired military, and you know, the patriotism and the flag runs deep through me. And that was, I took some pretty strong stands that was offensive to me. I also was very clear that, you know, the reason we fight is to defend people's right to do that sort of thing, but that doesn't mean I have to like it. And of course, Joyce had a different perspective on that. And I understood her perspective, that if you feel like you haven't been heard and this is the only way to get attention and this is a tool that you use. And I explained, well, I've had brothers that have come home under that flag, and it takes a whole different meaning to me. But we had those productive conversations. As we were flying up, I said, Joyce, are we gonna talk about the elephant in the room, because that had just exploded? And we both said, yeah, we got to. So we went to Jonesboro and we talked about our different perspectives on why Kaepernick was doing what he was doing and why it had different impacts on both of us based on our different backgrounds and experiences. And it doesn't necessarily mean either one of us is wrong, but it means we both need to try to understand each other and try to understand why we might not view this the same way because of our life experiences. So we've taken that approach on a lot of things, and most recently we worked together on hate crimes, and we died on another hill.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell a little bit about that, because this is the one who's been leading this fight on hate crimes for longer than anybody. And as you know, we got something kind of past this session, but not what Joyce and I hoped.
Yeah, you know, we keep, at least we're not alone when we die on the hill. We have each other there. But for the hate crime bill that I've been working on since 2021, and to stay with something that long, which you really have to do many times if it's something that really matters and you think that you have to keep working at it. So I did. But we came together, Jim and I and some other legislators, a bipartisan group, we came together to let's try this one more time. Arkansas is the only state at the time out of 47, and Arkansas and 2 other states. There were 3 of us without a hate crime bill. And so we thought, well, with all that's going on now, And even since that time, all the things have happened with the Asian community, because so we just have real live things happening in front of us. And so we got together, and the governor supported us, and the attorney general, and pastors, the clergy in 2001 was the group that helped sink the bill the last time. And so we thought, well, we got together with some clergy and Mark DeMoss at Mosaic Church and others. Mark got together with the whole, I don't know, it's like 170 pastors or so to sign on with us to support. Well, and we took it to committee 2 weeks ago or whatever. But in the meantime, we thought we were blowing and going, and we were so excited we were gonna get it done this time. Everybody's talking to each other. We now have pastors who were with us. So in the meantime, there was another bill that we started hearing rumors about that there was gonna be another bill. That would be great, fine, because that might be something we can do to work together. And then we find out it's not at all what we had in mind, or what anybody has in mind for a hate crime bill. Because for it to be, it's kind of like if somebody in here is about to, I don't know, let's just say you're about to choke. You respond to the thing. You don't run around and give everybody the Heimlich maneuver, because everybody's not hurting. And so the other bill just has something in it that's so vague that it's about everybody, and clearly not a hate crime bill. And even the folks who were sponsoring the bill didn't even want to call that. So we stayed with our bill, and we ran the bill, and that's another one. We got a motion because you're on the committee.
I made a motion, didn't get a second.
Didn't get a second. And it was just like when Jim was talking about the MLK, Ron Lee separation. The unawareness, I think, or the meanness, I'm not sure which one, the things that legislators sat there and said, and attacking a man who happened to be my pastor as a witness. And it did not pass, but the other law out there that I am clear to say is not a hate crime bill. But in the process of our discussing it, Jim offered, well, you should put these things in the bill, and that way, we can all work together. Because if it's going to be a hate crime bill, it's not based on something called every act that hurts somebody, every crime is a hate crime. Every crime is not a hate crime because it's defined according to the law. So there are these categories of folks that have been historically and continue to be attacked for who they are, for their religion, their race, their ethnicity. And we even have veterans and homeless people in it. So those are the things people objected to, and sexual orientation and gender identity. People objected to that, and that's why we got the motion and didn't get any further. But the other bill passed, there's something there, and the best I can say about it is there's something there. But it's clearly not a hate crime bill. So I don't know what to say about us going forward, because we won't be there next time.
I think one of the things that we learned from that, and one of the reasons that it was so difficult to pass something that all the polls show a majority of our candidates support, and there's a lot of misinformation about it, was because the legislature has become more and more partisan.
Yeah.
It's gotten to the point where if Joyce files a bill, even if it's a good bill, we're not gonna pass her bill, we're gonna kill her bill, and then let a Republican run the same piece of legislation.
Yeah.
It is literally that petty now in the legislature, where partisans, and I will say more on the majority party side than the minority party side, and I've been both ends of that. I've been in the minority, and I've been in the majority. I came to the House in 1994 when there were 13 Republicans and 87 Democrats. Now it's flipped almost the exact opposite. So I've seen this change. And what I will tell you is more disturbing than the partisan change is I've seen us turn into partisan politics like Washington, D.C., where we go into our caucus meetings and we view the Democrats as the enemies versus somebody who represents a different district with people with different life experiences and maybe different needs than we may have in our district. And so that's part of the reason that, I did what I did, which was leave the Republican Party and become an independent and try to begin efforts to say, let's find legislators not like me and Joyce because we're so great, but at least we disagree on a lot of things, but we're willing to have discussions to try to find common ground and to find areas that we can work together on. You won't see me and Joyce working together on abortion bill because we don't agree on that. But even in that area, we'll find some areas where we think there are some things we both agree on, and that nobody wants a bunch of abortions. We want, and maybe there's ways we can do that in a pro-life manner that prevents unwanted pregnancy. So we find ways to work together on those issues, even though we don't necessarily come from the same perspective on some of those things. That's kind of what I'm gonna focus on, and I'm gonna ask Joyce to be helping us on that effort, because we've already proven that it can be done. You know, when I was the majority leader in the Senate, the minority leader, Senator Keith Hendren from Memphis, and I co-sponsored a bill to help our state police, because we both knew that our state police were getting hired from other states. We were some of the lowest paid in the country. They do dangerous and hard work. That's not a partisan issue. And we went and we presented it together, and it passed overwhelmingly. Today, in the legislature, something like that would probably be defeated if I had a Democratic co-sponsor and I was a Republican. That's what's got to change, and that's what's dysfunctional. And I'm sure Joyce has probably seen the change from her perspective, even more so than I have.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is very hard to see. The thing that really has been helpful to me is when we had the big change from Democratic to Republican. It was not necessarily such a huge change for me, because I'll just tell you, being a woman and being an African American woman in the South, where we've had so many issues, we have them all over the country. I was already prepared for what it means to be a minority. That's one thing I had going, because I'd already been living this. And it went okay for a while. But when we got to the point that I saw my Republican friends would get in trouble because they worked on something with me, that was very, very disheartening. And so we learned as Democrats, here's what we have learned to do. If I want something to pass, and I think it's going to be an issue for my name to be on it, I can literally go to a Republican and say, here's a bill, will you run it so it will get passed? And rather than our relieving ourselves from having to do things like that, it's almost as if we're doing backdoor politics all the time. A good illustration of that is the MLK Robert E. Lee separation. Because there are people who worked on that bill, and we all decided we're going to sit down, we're not going to say anything, we're just going to let Dave Wallace, who was presented in the Senate. That's what we had to come to get some things done. And imagine what it would be like if we could work together and have the other side not be punished. But I'm not kidding when I say the people who can have the most impact on this is the public. Because it's the public that's punishing people for working with one another in elections. And on the merit, okay, fire me, put me out. But don't do it because, you've been over there collaborating with Jim Hendren. As a matter of fact, I got attacked on Twitter because I said, oh, Jim, well, this is a good thing, way to go. Oh, so would you please stop promoting Democrats? Republicans, because Democrats don't do that. I was talking about his ideas, not about him, and that's what we've just missed. So the thing that I think we have to do going forward, one of two things. I always believe you ought to have something for which you are willing to be unelected. You should have something, because that's how you know your core. So you have to have enough core to go ahead and do the right thing despite what the people who support you get there are going to say, because you might get unelected. You have to have the courage to do that, or you will kowtow to the worst instincts in us. And that's what I see happening with so many people, some in both parties. That's why I think it's up to all of us. Is this the future we want? I don't believe it is. And so we might one day be taken, to the guillotine or something, but once again, we'll go down together.
We won't be alone.
Together, yeah.
Well, we're going to have to leave pretty quick because we've got the session starting here in 10 or 15 minutes. I'm sure there's a whole bunch more sorry bills that we've got to go to. I'm sure we'll pass.
There's another bill.
Real quickly, do you all have any questions before we go start down?
Or challenges or advice as we try to do this? Yeah. Okay.
Two things. First of all, what I like about Rotary is when we're working shoulder to shoulder, our focus is on those people that need help.
Yeah.
The kids or whoever. And it's hard to throw rocks at each other when you're doing that. So I think the answer is for people to get more involved in service organizations, seeing the ultimate outcome for the good. Because, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you want to see kids have clothes, not have to sleep on the floor and things like that, And the other thing that I've read about earlier this year is in our society, it's a little more philosophical. We're starting to see that person that agrees, you know, this guy that disagrees with me as the embodiment of evil rather than a human being with flesh and blood who just happens to think differently than me. That's a dangerous trend that I see, that this person isn't a human, but they're the embodiment of something evil that I've got to get rid of.
Are you pointing at somebody at that table?
Yeah, I was, sorry, guys. No.
Very, very valid points, and unfortunately, very true.
Do you think that it's just a benefit for y'all to be there, even if you don't get anything passed, just to say that you can exist that way?
Yes, it absolutely is, because I think, I feel some responsibility to try to model what I'm asking other people to model. And so when you're there in person and they can actually see it rather than like just saying it happened, that makes a huge difference. It's also, when we introduced the hate crime bill, for example, we thought it might have a chance, but as things went on, we knew it didn't have a chance. So why in the world did we introduce it and present it in the first place? It's kind of just what you said. People need to see two people who look like us sitting down trying to do something for this entire state. Not for us, but for the entire state. And it's a message that we keep pushing it back and pushing it back. And we can't change things in our state until we decide to face big issues and be brave enough to talk about those things we whisper about. Because when you have a whisper campaign, that's kind of all it is. And we need to be all out.
I want to expand a little bit because what Angel said about setting stuff aside. The first term that President Obama was running for office, there was a group, I was in Rotary, I think I was president that year, but anyway, there were about 5 or 6 Rotarians who one day a week they would meet at the local supermarket, had a little cafe, and it was pretty well split, Republican and Democrats, and they'd have some really thorough discussion, but when it was all said and done, we're going back and we're doing good for the community, we're doing good for the world. And for a few years, I was at Magnolia, and I worked for UAMS, trying to encourage more students to consider healthcare as a career. So I was in school a lot, and one of the things that really upsets me is that we still have to tell kids that they're different. And I'm talking, and I know that because of grants and other sorts of things, how it all got started. I think it's time for us to stop teaching kids that they're different, because I've seen so many biracial kids, when they put down what your ethnicity is, they didn't have a clue. And I've seen some of them put comments down that we would give them. And I'm speaking because I have a daughter, so has 3 kids. So we have an African American and Caucasian mixed 2, and a Hispanic, and another one's sort of like the United Nations, but they're different. And we're not different, because all you gotta do is watch the little ones play together.
Yeah, we have to teach them sometimes to not like each other, unfortunately. And let me just kind of go back to your question about the minority, because again, I went from being the president pro tem of the Senate last session to being a caucus of one this session. But I will tell you, is my ability to pass legislation and have influence diminished because of that? It is, but it's still important. When I was president of the Senate, I had a meeting with all of our committee chairmen, and I said, look, your job is to make sure that everybody gets a fair shot to be heard. Whether you agree with them or disagree with them, Joyce Elliott's constituents have every bunch of responsibility and right to be heard as the ones from Northwest Arkansas. It drives me crazy when there are efforts to silence dissenting voices in the legislature, and we're seeing more and more of that. And I think, again, it's just kind of a symptom of the partisanship and the division that's getting deeper and deeper in our state and our nation. We're getting to the point now where not only do we yell loud, but we try to suppress people who disagree with us. And I just think that's so unhealthy for us as a state. As I said, I learned a lot by getting to know Joyce and her perspective better. And there's value in hearing those voices and people that, yeah, you're going to be one of 7 and you may not be able to get a whole lot done, except represent your people and their concerns and their values, and that's important. So I think there's still a lot of importance in the minority party being heard.
Do y'all have any kind of a blog or website, Facebook page, anything people can go to, be referred to?
Well, well, if you go to commongroundar.com.
Okay,
I've got the
Okay.
video, I'll email it.
okay, cool.
We've got a website that is designed on fostering these type of discussions and leaders who represent these kind of philosophy. And in fact, we just put a video out today that kind of explains our overall mission and why we think it's necessary to kind of get away from the extreme partisan politics that are dominating our system now. So commongroundar.org, go and look at it. There you can get on our mailing list, and we send stuff out every week or two, giving updates. And we're going to be traveling the state, and I'm going to be making this lady come with us out.
And I will.
And we're going to be trying to bring this message of, let's put some sanity and some decency back into politics and get away from the screaming and the hollering. And that's kind of our mission. And again, it kind of grows from what Joyce and I have experienced working together. And we haven't, had a whole lot of legislative successes, but I think we've had some successes in other ways. And the fact is, as paltry as the hate crimes bill or whatever they want to call it is, there wouldn't be that were it not for us putting down the stake early in the session and saying we got to do something. Well, thank you all for having us. We're going to
Thank you
grab
so
a
much.
bite here and then probably have to head out.
Yeah, all right.